Welcome back. Now let's look at the recent developments in Mozambique. That country is currently facing a deepening crisis after the International Monetary Fund suspended funding to them following the discovery of more than $1 billion in previously undisclosed government debt. And recently, a staff team from IMF visited Mozambique to assess recent economic developments and help design corrective measures needed to prevent a further deterioration in economic performance. And of course, they've come out with their report. Our research team from Exotics Partners London has been following this trend and has come up with a report titled Mozambique, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. The global head of research at Exotics Partners London, Stuart Culverhouse, joins me now. Good afternoon, Stuart.
Good afternoon.
Now, why this title, Mozambique, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish?
Well, the title is a sci-fi reference. It is the title of a book in the Douglas Adams series of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And specifically, the title refers to what the dolphins say when they leave Earth. So it's a bit flippant. Some people have adopted the title as a way of saying goodbye, and in sci-fi circles, and you might imagine that Mozambique investors have essentially said goodbye to the country over recent months because of this undisclosed debt issue. The other reference, of course, is dolphins eat tuna, arguably, and other fish, and a lot of this undisclosed debt is to do with fishing, the fishing industry.
Yeah, which of course caused this crisis. Now, the IMF has published a statement after the visit to Mozambique. What are your key highlights? What are the key highlights of this statement?
There are four key highlights in our view. Firstly, it confirms that the undisclosed debt was $1.4 billion and therefore may allay fears that there was more, which we didn't know about. So that hopefully puts a lid on the matter, and it confirms that as a result public debt rose to 86% of GDP. That's some 10 points higher than it had previously been. Secondly, the IMF analysis alludes to the fact that it might change the risk category of Mozambique to a high-risk debt category from previously moderate. I think we would have expected that to happen, but it's useful for the fund to confirm that. And it will, if it is confirmed, have implications, I think, for the way that the fund will see their flexibility in terms of their policy response. Thirdly, it states that there has been some progress on improving transparency, governability and accountability on the debt. And of course, it was the debt issue or the lack of transparency that caused this problem. So that's promising, although the fund do state clearly that more needs to be done. And then the final point we would highlight is that further progress on resuming the program was agreed only in December, so fairly recently. Further progress will be conditional on the authorities taking or implementing corrective macro measures. And that is obviously something that we will be watching going forward.
Now, with IMF coming up with these statements, what impact do you think it will make on investors' confidence?
I think the statement can be seen as reasonably positive for the time being, in as much as there's no further debt sitting behind there. The authorities are overseeing a policy correction. There's been some improvements on transparency. I think all those are positives, and obviously what we would have liked to have seen, but has taken some time to reach. So in that sense, I think bondholders can have some comfort that we've made progress. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet. Clearly more needs to be done, and the authorities crucially need to oversee this corrective policy measures. And there's also other issues on the debt that need to be worked out in terms of two of the loans, what is going to happen to them. So I think it's positive in the very short term, but I think we're a long way from rebuilding the confidence that has been shattered by the country.
Now, in all of this, seeing what Mozambique has gone through and is still going through, what lessons are there for other African countries like Nigeria, to learn from Mozambique's experience?
I think, flippantly one might say, you should disclose the debt to the IMF when you're talking to them about a program, and not disclosing it is going to be a problem and leads to the suspension that we've seen. So I think countries have to be honest with the IMF about the data statistics and the debt. I think on a serious point, there are two lessons for countries in general and Africa in this instance. Firstly, I think from a debt management perspective, countries have to be more transparent about the borrowings that they are undertaking, the amounts and the terms, and also the use of proceeds. It's all very well borrowing, but when we find out later that it was to finance military vessels, then I think that raises some issues. I think other countries can learn from those mistakes, but I also think it's not just about the borrowers, it's about the investors too. The investors can probably be more questioning and discerning about some of these issues and probably share some of the responsibility. I think the second point will be improving investor relations. There has been very poor communication throughout this whole process since the undisclosed debt came to be known. Very poor communication about what it meant, about what the authorities were going to do about it. And I think investors, when they are borrowing billions of dollars on the governments, when they're borrowing billions of dollars on the international markets, have to improve the way that they talk to those investors.
Right, thank you very much for your time, Stuart.
Thank you.
Right, and that was Stuart Culverhouse. He's the Global Head of Research at Exotics Partners, London. Well, we'll move on now. Here in Nigeria, analyst report from EcoBank Research Group released on Tuesday says the CBN's reconstitution of a Sky Bank's board and executive management will not impair the lender's deposits franchise, as the regulatory action doesn't imply a roadmap to liquidation. Our report says the intervention was timely and averts any potential systemic risks Sky Bank would have posed to the industry if its liquidity risk had been allowed to materialize. On recapitalization, the new report sees the new management and the CBN looking at the option of issuing a longer-dated bond in exchange for all the non-performing risk assets, in which case Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria could be brought into the affairs of Sky Bank. And the Apapa port in Nigeria was once one of the biggest bottlenecks in an economy faced with challenges of power cuts and institutional dysfunction. Reforms to the port are changing things as authorities look to expand earnings for the economy through increased exports. Nigeria expects to nearly double its non-oil revenue this year to counter the effect of lost crude income.
Queues of trucks are a usual sight at Nigeria's Apapa port as they wait to load their cargo, leading to traffic jams along the roads leading to the port. The port that was once the busiest in Africa, with imported products like used cars, rice and frozen fish being offloaded from piles of containers, has in recent months become quiet. Nigeria's economy has been hit by a slump in oil revenues. To boost the economy, the government hopes to increase exports and productivity while improving investment climate and ease of doing business. Last month, the central bank said it will invest in a 500 billion naira debenture to be issued by Nigerian Export-Import Bank as part of a bid to diversify the country's revenues away from crude.
The way forward and the way that we intend to go about it in the Nigerian Port Authority is to see that we encourage other sources of revenue, so that at least whatever we are losing on that side, we try to regain it on the other sides. And how do you go about that? We try to encourage export. That is to promote exportation of goods instead of the importation, since imports are not coming as they used to be.
Nigeria's central bank is looking to improve export financing, increase access of exporters to low-interest credit, and offer additional opportunities for them to upscale and expand their businesses.
When we come back after the break, we'll look into what's happening in Zimbabwe. Just stay with us.